Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links video. Today we're looking at the Dark Magician and what kind of new deck we can build using cards from the latest structure deck that we had released. Now the big notable card from that is obviously going to be the Dark Sword Magician, which is pretty good, but doesn't directly do anything with the Dark Magician or any of the Dark Magician cards. So starting off, we do have the Dark Magician itself. And the Dark Magician is a little bit unassuming. 2500 attack is though a good stat to have. And it does specifically work with Magician Shuffle, which is our skill. So this skill can be used if you only have spellcaster monsters with 2500 or more attack in your deck. Requirement: on turn 2 onward, by revealing a dark attribute spellcaster type monster with 1700 or more defense in your hand to your opponent. Now notably, this will only be Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl. We can add a Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from our deck or graveyard to our hand, and send one dark attribute spellcaster monster with 1700 or more defense from your hand to the graveyard. So again, these will always only ever be Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. So the way that this deck is using it is we are going to always search Dark Magician and then throw Dark Magician into the graveyard. If we already have Dark Magician in hand, we'll obviously search Dark Magician Girl and then throw Dark Magician into the graveyard. And why are we doing that? That is because we want to make use of Dark Magician Girl's effect to gain 500 attack for each Dark Magician in the graveyard, which means she becomes a 2500 attacker. Now, being able to spam out 2500s is nice and all, but why is that relevant now? Well, it's relevant because of our new trap card, the Curtain of Sparks, which is when an opponent's monster declares an attack. If you have a spellcaster type monster in your graveyard, the attacking monster loses 500 attack. Now, if we have 2500 attack monsters, such as our Dark Magician Girl, such as our Dark Sword Magician, or such as Dark Magician itself, that means we trade with 3000 attack monsters, and that specific number is extremely relevant because that just so happens to be what Ancient Arise Dragon gets up to, and Ancient Arise Dragon is very, very prevalent in the current meta. I actually think Curtain of Sparks is one of the best anti-Ancient Arise Dragons cards that we've gotten, and it's very, very powerful pretty much just for that reason. So one thing you might notice about this deck is we are not playing a lot of cards that will help us get to our opponent's life points. We're not playing Tawna. We were originally playing Tawna. We did dabble with it a little bit to be able to change our opponent's defense monsters into face-up attack or change their attack monster to defense, but we found that there were just too many high-level monsters in this deck. I think realistically, you have to make the decision whether you want to play the Seven's Rib Magician or whether you want to play Tawna the Windweaver. I think these two cards can't really work together in the deck because we really do want Dark Sword Magician in the deck, because cheating it out is obviously a really, really strong tempo play, as well as the fact it's 2500, which the whole point of the deck is that we're playing Curtain of Sparks to create a defensive spellcaster deck that can trade upwards with 3000 attack monsters. Tawna is multifaceted. It's good to get your opponent's life points, which is always going to be useful, as well as changing 2500 attack monsters from your opponent's field to defense mode. I prefer Seven's Robe Magician just because this card can just get so big and attack over anything that it doesn't really matter. And I especially like combining this card with the new magic card that we got, Magic Curtain. So I've gone with Seven's Robe Magician in this build, but again, Tawna works just as well. It's just a slightly different variation on the deck. Another card that you might notice is not in here is Dark Magic Attack. And the reason for that is this build of the deck specifically is here to play very defensively. We are here to set up ideally 3 2500 attack monsters and have them sit behind our trap cards and be protected as much as we can. And in order to do that, we want Dark Magician in the graveyard as often as possible, which means we will not have access to him to use the Dark Magic Attack spell itself. We do have our 1 copy of Magical Stream in here. We might bump this up to 2, but I think 1 feels good at the moment. If we were to bump the number up to 2, we'd probably take out Magic Curtain because the rest of this is all just too important for the deck to function. But the thing to take away from this deck is that this is a defensive control style deck. This isn't like the SAR build where we're trying to summon out 3 massive guys, attack over our opponent and kill them through whatever they make. This is, we're going to try and get 3 2500 attack monsters and try and sit behind them for as long as possible, which means sometimes your win condition will be decking your opponent out and sometimes it'll just be out trading them with our trap cards. So the next card we'll talk about is Light Sorcerer of Sanctity. This card I still think is completely bonkers, and I think this could be a staple going forward in any deck that can actually fit it in. So any deck where we can use a 1400 attack vanilla magic juggler, we'll probably be using the Light Sorcerer of Sanctity, just because reducing a monster by 600 again is very relevant. It does play very well around the barrier, it does play very well around Curtain of Sparks, so this card is just really, really strong. Next up, Fire Golem. Again, this does occasionally come up if you're up against the Warrior variant, and they'll be playing the Yami Ruler or Bender Break in some weird situations. If anyone's still actually bothering to play that, we can weaken it and get over it, and it is still a Fire Spellcaster, which means it's a Spellcaster to go in the graveyard to Curtain of Sparks online, as well as Mystic Dealer for the discard, and it's a Fire monster to work with Seven's Robe Magician. Obviously, if you're not playing the 7's Road and you're instead playing Tawna, you probably don't need to use the Fire Golem, but it's in here for that reason at the moment. Same with Mystic Dealer. Being Spellcaster is good, discarding cards and drawing cards is good, and it's a water monster, which is good. We have Gazelle, who we value having 1500 attack over having the Doriado, which is a Spellcaster, and that is because oftentimes you'll have to get aggressive, and just having access to 15 and 1400 attackers is really, really good to get that aggro game going. Next up, we have Magic Juggler, which again, 1400 is decent, as well as the fact that this is a light monster, which does pair quite nicely with our Light Sorcerer of Sanctity. Like we've already been singing its praises, it's just really good. And then we have Spell Archer, which again, if we were playing Tawna, we wouldn't be on the Spell Archer, but we just like having the one wind monster. And if we actually filter through our wind monsters available, you can see we do not actually have many good options. Realistically, it's going to be a vanilla, or it's going to be Tawna, or it's going to be Bender Break, and we can't put Bender Break in this deck. So really, we don't really have many options. I mean, I suppose we could play Sonic Attacker, but who's playing Sonic Attacker? So next up, Magical Stream. Again, just be able to pop your opponent's back row can be really strong. I like this card over Dark Magic Attack, again, because we want to get our Dark Magician into the graveyard as soon as possible, but also Magical Stream can be used just more often. It doesn't have any restrictions on it. It's just, do we have a Spellcaster? Good, we can just pop a back row. Shield and Sword is really proving itself to be unbelievably powerful. Most decks completely fall over to this. This card is only really bad against warriors, and even then, there are still situations where it does come up and can be really, really strong. So I really feel like Shield and Sword has really shown itself to be such a really powerful tool, and sometimes you just win games entirely off this card on its own. It's crazy. Magic Curtain, again, really, really good. We can use it to get out 7's Road Magician, which is the ideal way to use it. Pump 7's Road up, and then we can attack, and we cannot be destroyed by Widespread, so it protects our entire board. Although just making a big tempo play off Magic Curtain can be really good. And this specifically summons any spellcaster, so we could even summon a Dark Magician Girl if we had to. Or, obviously, Dark Sword Magician. Widespread Ruin is the best card in the game, so that's why it's in here. There's not really much more to say than that. And we've already talked quite a lot about Curtain of Sparks, but still, it's really, really strong just to be able to get your monsters up to 3,000. 25 on the Dark Magician Girl, or the Dark Sword Magician, or the Dark Magician. Trades with 3,000s. Really, really powerful. Can really stop a lot of decks. So we've already talked about how the deck plays a little bit, but there are some caveats to that, right? This deck is going to struggle a lot against some of the other decks in the meta. For example, machines are able to easily summon out 3,500 or 3,600 attack monsters, which is bigger than 3,000 and therefore can attack over our Curtain of Sparks, which does kind of suck. As well as the fact that Acebreaker can also pop our monsters, thus not having to attack into them, which also does hurt us quite a bit. As well as other spellcaster decks. 7's Road Magician can also just boost well over 3,000 and just attack over Curtain of Sparks. So it's just another one of those really good cards against this deck. Any deck that can basically boost over 3,000 is going to have a really strong matchup into this deck, but any deck that doesn't actually does really struggle to get through. And a lot of the time we are going to be playing those slow, grindy, methodical games. We're going to try and out-resource our opponent. We're going to try and get rid of all of their big monsters as they try to clear our big monsters, and usually we're going to win out in those trades. But again, if you wanted to swap things up, for example, if you don't have 2 7's Road, I think we could happily take these out for Tawna, maybe even a couple. If we did that, we wouldn't need to have our Spell Archer in the deck anymore, so we could just start flinging whatever. We also wouldn't need to get all our attributes in line, so we could take out a lot of these other cards and then just start throwing in basically just good stuff cards. Because the Magician Shuffle skill only stops us using monsters with 2,500 or more attack that aren't spellcasters. So as long as we're not playing 2,500 attack monsters, we can put whatever we want in this deck. But if we do not have a critical amount of spellcasters, Curtain of Sparks will turn off, which is why it's probably best to still stick with spellcasters wherever we can. But yeah, this is the deck. It's decent. I don't want to say this deck is like super crazy strong, because I do think the 7's Axel Road version is definitely a lot stronger. But if you really want to play kind of the Dark Magician flair of this deck, if you really want to play your Dark Magician girls, because we've just obviously got them from the structure deck and we have a lot of these cards anyway, then this is how I personally would build it. Again, it's not an aggro deck. This is primarily going to be a kind of control style deck. And there are multiple different ways to build it. This is just the way that I have chosen to do so. But let's find some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.
行くよラッシュデュエル